It was last week, I forget where I was, and somebody had a story about a Sunday school teacher that told the parable of the prodigal son to the class. And got to the end of the whole thing and then said, so who was it that was upset by the son coming home? And the little boy said, the fatted calf. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Ernie Vineyard. I am the Clovis District Superintendent, and I know several of you have asked where my wife is. In fact, some of you didn't even say hi before you said, where's your wife? We have a new great-grandchild, and so that's where she is today. And I do have pictures, by the way. So Jesus is talking about a shepherd finding a lost sheep and throwing a party, and a housewife jumping up and down in glee over the discovery of a lost coin. You know, people usually don't think about God in that way. But these are the images that Jesus offers here. And Jesus is saying that God is more thrilled over the one person who is lost being found than an entire sanctuary full of righteous people. And if these two parables about the lost sheep and the lost coin don't get the point across, Jesus follows with that longer story about a man and his sons. And they all make the same point. Each one describes the loser's sense of loss and tells the thrill of discovery. And ends in jubilation. Right before Jesus tells that parable about the prodigal son, he says, in the same way I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. God and all his heavenly hosts rejoice when just one who has been lost is found. Remember, this all begins because Jesus was hanging out with sinners and tax collectors, and those in the temple authority didn't approve. This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And that's what prompts Jesus to tell these three parables that highlight God's extreme grace and the extreme ungrace of the Pharisees. In a sense, Jesus is saying, you think you know God? You really don't. God doesn't play by your rules. Here is what God is about. Father had two sons. The boy's growing up in a nice home where there is everything in the world that anyone would want. Love, joy, fellowship, comforts. And the younger son decides that he no longer wants to be a part of this home. He thinks that the grass must be greener somewhere else. And he asks his father for a share of his inheritance so he can leave. And the father gives him what he asks. Allows him to exercise his free will. He divides his estate, and the boy leaves home with pockets full of money. Money that he did not earn, because it all came from his father. And we read that he heads out for a far country. And I'm sure for a while it was as good as he thought it could get. He had everything. He lived it up. Did what the world calls a good time. Went to the bars, went to all the parties. He had all kinds of friends, I'm sure. But there came a day when he reached into his pocket and there was nothing left. And not only was he broke, he found that the country where he had gone and thought had greener grass had no grass, because there was a severe famine in that country. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't go home. He was embarrassed. Did he think that his father would never accept him? Was he so steeped in this world that did not live grace that he couldn't imagine being received back into his home? Who do we know, or who do you know, that might feel too embarrassed to return to church? Because we, the church, are the body of Christ on this earth. And we're to represent God to the world. And we're to play by God's rules, not our rules. See, the church should be the one place where people aren't afraid to come back. We should be the place of celebration. Are we? You know, for many reasons, there is just a small percentage of Clovis population in church today. I'm not talking about here at Trinity. I'm talking about all the houses of worship. Even if you include all the people at Central Baptist, it's still the minority of the people in Clovis. Do you wonder why it is that more people aren't here? Now we know that there are some that are not in church because they really haven't even thought about it. But you know, there are people who are not here today because they don't feel welcome. And it's not necessarily because of you. It's because of something that has happened in the past. Maybe they didn't act right as a child when they were in church, and someone called them on it. Said, "Why are you walking around when you should be sitting still and listening to that fascinating sermon?" Or maybe they think that they've done so much wrong they just can't be welcomed. See, this younger son hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. I mean, what happened to all those friends that he got when he showed up with all this money? They probably said, "Sorry, you've lost all your money. Not interested in you anymore." Found out he really didn't have friends in this country. And it says, as he fed the pigs, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. You imagine when Jesus is telling this story, every Jew there, talking Pharisees and tax collectors listening to him, were appalled. Because a Hebrew could go no lower than feeding pigs.